Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the MHP Show. I'm your host, Derek Vickers. We have another guest on with us today, Mr. Andy Freeman. And before we get into that, I want to just do a little shout out for our parkinvestingpro.com. So you've heard me talk about this before at go.parkinvestingpro.com. I basically did a free webinar that gives you the basics of mobile home park investing, the things I didn't know in the beginning, the things when I got into this business that I thought this business was going to be passive, but found out really quickly that it wasn't. And I share those things in this webinar. It's a lot of things in the basics that I wish I would have known when I started in this business. So go to go.parkinvestingpro.com. So now we get into it with Mr. Andy Freeman. He's the owner and operator of Enjoy Communities. Andy, welcome to the MHP Show, dude. How's it going?
Derek, it's going great. Thanks for having me on. I like that little intro you got, and it sounds like a valuable service because, like I said, everyone thinks this is a passive space until they get into it and they realize they maybe were a little tricked on that front.
Yeah, until you get into it and get everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. Like, oh, mobile home parks is passive. Then you get in, and then your first tenant burns down their house when you evict them or something crazy like that. So to give us a little bit of your background, dude, and I see you're on LinkedIn all the time, and we'll get into that, and I love it. So give us a little bit of your background, how you got into this business, and what you did before.
Yeah, so my background it's not a glamorous background. I mean, I went to college, I got an accounting degree, blah blah blah. Wasted 10 years doing that, in my opinion. Looking back, I took the jump from accounting, and I got a sales position with Toyota, and I got into sales, and my life kind of changed at that point because my hard work in a W-2 job, sometimes you can work as hard as you want, but you're still on a fixed salary. Whereas I got into car sales, and I was able to just bust my butt and immediately 5x, 10x my income by just busting my butt and working hard. Right. So that was kind of what opened the gates for where I'd worked there for 5 years, saved almost every penny. And then I had some, money to play with where I started looking at how do I grow this money? Because a car sales job, you're trading time for dollars. And I was kind of burning myself out, and I'm like, I got to find something else. So started listening to podcasts like these, soaking up all the knowledge I could, did a short stint in single family fix and flips. And I was going to do some rentals, but I counted, how many rentals I would need to get to my number. And I didn't want to deal with a bunch of single family homes, yada, yada, yada. Got into mobile home parks and partnered on some of my first transactions, helped go from, my plan was to buy one park on my own, ended up partnering, and we bought 10 parks in our first year and just kind of scaled faster than I ever thought I could through partnerships and through people that were, a couple years ahead of me in the space. And long story short, kind of branched off from that, started my own thing with Enjoy Communities and Enjoy Capital. Got a handful of parks right now and a handful more on the way. And kind of how long story short, took sales income, put it into mobile home parks. Still not passive, but I have more passive income than I did with the car job.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. It's interesting. The more I talk to people and I realize the people that actually started in sales, I was in insurance sales before I started this. I did that for 9 years. So when I first started, I was cold calling businesses door to door. And I know Abraham, when I talked to Abraham Anderson, he started insurance sales. My buddy Ryan, he was in car sales too. And so it's interesting. So let me ask you this. So what do you think that you learned in car sales that translated over in the MHP business?
Yeah. So actually one thing I was really good at follow-up. So a lot of people in the car sales don't necessarily have, not to stereotype, don't have a college degree. They kind of get into that. They're, I was in internet sales. So I was doing a lot of follow-up. I was waking up in the middle of the night and taking leads and calling on them. And it's a little bit different. It's there. We're trying to get someone to buy from us. With mobile home parks, you're trying to get someone to sell you your park. But that's what allowed me. I was really good at follow-up and database, taking notes. And that's what I kind of transitioned over to the mobile home park space. I just hammered the follow-up, sent the letters, made the calls, spent a good, the first 8 months just building a database and cold calling. And I think that was my skill. I was able to find, 5 or 6 off-market deals and take those to more experienced operators, partner with them and help grow. So I guess to answer your question in short form, just the follow up and the consistency that goes with following up with leads, rather than just waiting for opportunities to come to you. Kind of go out and get them.
Right. Doesn't work like that, unfortunately. I remember when I was in insurance, I'd recruit people to come on board, and they would, be sitting in the office twiddling their thumbs and wondering why they weren't getting any deals. Like, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Same with the car industry, man. There's just people twiddling their thumbs, waiting for stuff to come to them. I'm like, it doesn't happen that way, man. So it was kind of low hanging fruit. It was a really easy, I don't want to say easy, but it was fairly easy to be successful in that space. Just put some hard work in and some extended hours in the beginning, and it was, able to be successful.
Yeah, that's great. And another interesting thing, it was so different, and probably the same for you, when you started calling park owners, you were trying to give them money instead of trying to get money from people. That was the difference for me. I'm like, oh, this is relatively easy. The fact that when I made my first cold, I didn't know what the hell I was talking about. But other than that, it was like, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so, definitely different flip.
No, go ahead, man. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, yeah, definitely. I mean, I was balancing following up with park, with people looking to buy a car, but then I'd get an owner that would call me back. I'd have to run up to the roof, and I'd go find a truck and sit in the truck, and then talk to them on the phone while trying to balance, because there was a little bit of an overlap while I was still working that job and doing the follow up, which I know you kind of tell everybody. I mean, you were working full-time job in the beginning yourself, versus I kind of had enough saved to quit and go do it. But it was hard to balance both, which I know you were doing.
Yeah, it was insanely hard. I was up till 2 or 3 o'clock at night, getting up and going to the gym still at 5, getting 2 and 3 hours of sleep every night. We had a baby. A baby on the way. Well, baby was there actually, because the baby was born like a couple months after we got the first park. It was nuts, dude. It was nuts. So I saw on LinkedIn that you just closed a deal recently. Tell us about that deal.
Yeah, so we just closed on one in the Twin Cities, right outside of 5 miles outside of St. Paul, 5 miles out or 10 miles outside of Minneapolis. That was a seller finance deal, so you would think it would be easy, but that one turned into a roller coaster with the seller doing seller financing, but he didn't disclose that he had a substantial loan on the property, that he'd taken out a bridge loan to pay off his ex-wife, buy her out of the deal, trying to keep it a secret from her, and just a whole other. So it ended up taking longer than your normal bank transaction, but we're able to get it done. We had to bring a little more money than we had thought to the table, which we in exchange asked for a price concession. So we were able to get a pretty good basis on there. We got a nice price concession, got the improved rate, got down to a 4% rate. So overall it worked out. But like from going through them, they, even when they seem like if it's going too smooth, something's going to happen usually with these transactions. So
yeah,
it was a little bit of a bumpy ride, but we like that market. It's a city park, so it's a little more dense, kind of like what you get when you're closer to a larger town. The area is good, but smaller lots, a little more density, older, a little bit older infrastructure, but overall solid deal.
Yeah. And that's a lot of the stuff that we own is very urban and very dense. We were looking at a park in Tampa one time that had 40 homes on 1.75 acres. Like, that's dense. So how did you, with the market and where it is right now, I'm like, damn, Andy's closing deals right now. Was that a deal you were working on for a while, or was it kind of in the works, or did you just find it, or how did you find that deal?
Yeah. So someone brought that to me off market, brought directly to me. But here, this kind of goes back to the relationships. I'd closed several parks with them. I typically never retrade. I'm easy to deal with. I don't make their life hard. So they brought me this, but the seller was going through literally a 10-year divorce. And that person that brought it to me had stayed in contact, over 2-3 years, and finally divorce settled and he was ready to sell. So that was brought to me, and, normal. And then it's kind of a half and half at this point. In the beginning, I had to find all my deals. The other deals we've closed were sellers I had talked to 3 years ago, calling me and saying, "Hey, I'm ready to sell." So it's still just planting the seeds from 3-4 years ago, and they just come around. You never know when it's going to come, but randomly you'll get a call or follow-up email and just kind of stay on top of it. So I wouldn't even say it's new stuff I've been actively calling and, "Hey, I'm ready to sell." It's just randomly, but it's all from the different follow-up avenues you've done over the years.
Yeah. And that's great. And that's that's important for our listeners to know. Like, if you start calling on parks today, you're not going to find a deal today, and probably not in a month, probably not in 60 days, but you're going to be planting those seeds. And I've lost plenty of deals where I called the guy back. I was scared to call him back for whatever reason. And, oh yeah, we just sold, Derek. You ever had that happen? It sucks. And I'm like, Jesus.
That's the worst. That's the worst feeling. And that's what, I mean, we've had it where I've called 5 times, right? He said, no. And finally it's like, yeah, I'll entertain an offer. And if I hadn't called right in that second, like, I wouldn't have got it. Right. And I've had that happen, what you said, more times than not, where you said, lose my number, don't call. And then all of a sudden you sold it. So it's like, it just shows your frequency has got to at least be every 6 months. I mean, ideally every 3 months, because it's stuff can change in a blink, especially when you're dealing with older mom and pops. A lot of times, I mean, they don't really want to sell, but their health forces them to sell, or their wife says, hey, you finally need to retire. So it's just being in front of them at the right time. But like you mentioned, it's not going to happen in 60 days. You're not going to get a park under contract today. You really have to, I tell everyone it's usually an 8-9 month, maybe even a year process. And you got to really hammer it. So it's got to be something, you got to stick it out and just be consistent with it.
Yeah, right. No, for sure. Totally. And are you buying rural parks too? Or are you basically, buying in major MSAs? Or I know you just said you bought that one outside of Twin Cities. I know people that have bought there as well, but what's your typical like MSA criteria?
Yeah, see, I don't, I guess a combination of both. I don't have anything that's like hours away from an MSA. Everything's at least 30 minutes, kind of within striking distance, where someone could still live far away. They could have, I mean, that Minneapolis park, I think it's only 4 something acres and there's 70 units. So it's pretty dense. I think it's like 15 to 17, but then we have a, 54 unit on 50 acres, right? So basically almost every home has an acre, there's extra land, but they're huge lots, right? So those are a little more rural, but they're still within 20, 30 minutes of a major MSA. I don't like to if I have to fly somewhere, I don't want to have to fly and then drive 2 hours to get to a park. So something that's kind of like, you can fly and get there in 45 minutes to an hour. So it's kind of a mixture of both. This is actually the topic. I know you're speaking at that convention in Tennessee as well. That's the topic that they had me speaking on, is rural versus urban parks. So I got to prepare what I'm going to say, but that's kind of, there's arguments for both, right? You get kind of more bang for your buck as far as acreage and land on the the rural parks, but then you're going to probably have private utilities and such. So we like to be within striking distance, but not necessarily don't have to be in a major MSA.
Right. Yeah. And we've typically, the reason why I asked this question, because I've been looking at some parks that are not as, we've been, really market kind of, snobs, I guess, so to say. We're only buying in Orlando, Tampa, like the places like that. And now it's just so hard to buy in those because the owners, they still want 4 caps for these piece of crap parks. And I know the work that's involved in those things, so I can't pay those numbers. But, it's like, are you going to kill yourself? Is the juice worth the squeeze? And so that's why I asked, because I've been, really fumbling around with some other markets trying to see where value is. And, you can find a 10 cap or a 12 cap in a rural market, but, is it worth it? I was talking to Ferd the other week and he's like, yeah, we couldn't even get stuff delivered to a park that we had in a rural market. So that's like, okay, I don't know how good of an idea that is.
I know. So I know what you're talking. I know which park you're talking about on that one. But yeah, that one's an outlier where that's super rural, and that's already in a state that's already kind of. There's Omaha, and there's a few in the state you're talking about. There's only a few cities, but like if you're in a smaller, like Ohio's a small state, right? So there's nothing that's true rural in Ohio because there's still a lot of big cities. I mean, you got Cincinnati, Cleveland, Columbus. You could be anywhere in Ohio and still be close to a major MSA, but it's a big state like Nebraska or even Iowa is kind of more, few and far between towns. That's where you kind of get yourself in trouble. But we have a pretty rural park in it's called Mifflin Township. It's a small township outside of Columbus, and it feels pretty rural, big lots. But I mean, we're all the way full occupancy. A lot rents up at $450, and it's a senior park with tons of demand. So there's still that demand, and it's not the same as apartments. And you know this, you don't have to be in Phoenix. You don't have to necessarily be in Tampa. There's a bunch of other markets where you can be successful. And if the property's shown that it's been fully occupied for the last 30 years, then odds are that's going to continue. So I would say there's, if you got to pivot a little bit, especially with everyone's after these big metros, especially down in Florida. I mean, that's already, Florida as a whole is one of the most competitive states. So I can't even compete with Florida.
Yeah, it's
yeah,
bloodbath, dude. Yeah, it is. And I've got, there's sellers and things that I've been talking to and working with for a while. And I think we'll get them when they, come around, like you were talking about earlier, but they're getting pounded every day by, every broker, every wholesaler. And, I admire the hustle, but it's just getting a little crazy in Florida. So that's why we're sort of exploring other areas. So you're on LinkedIn all the time. And I love it, dude. I think social media is a big thing, especially for guys like you and I and what we're trying to do. Like, what value have you gotten from LinkedIn and posting on there and connecting with people?
Yeah, so LinkedIn, and people say I'm on there all the time. I really post like once a week, right? I mean, maybe twice, and then I go for a good stretch, but then I take time off. But there's so many people not utilizing that platform. I mean, I think there's like, and the 90% of people that are on there don't even post, right? So it's like ripe for the taking if you're consistent with it. So I've had, podcasts, which is, nothing necessarily monetary at this point. I can't say I've made X amount of dollars off there, but podcast appearances, speaking appearances, investors, deal flow. People see you closing deals. They reach out with other deals to send your way. There's a trade-off. You do get a lot of spam and stuff coming. There's all kinds of lenders wanting to do business and stuff. So you got to filter through that. But overall, I've taken it where, just a short time ago, I was struggling to raise money on our first deal, having to do Facebook ads and such, post on LinkedIn. And now we post a deal. I send one email and we got repeat investors ready to go. It's, that Minneapolis deal oversubscribed in short time, which, now looking back, I'm like, that was in a matter of a year, and that's just from being consistent. It gives people familiarity when, if they are on the fence about investing, they see your presence on LinkedIn. They can kind of, they just see you're a real person, you're active. It helps give them peace of mind. So a lot of networking. I've, bunch of people, if they've been in town in Indianapolis, I'll go meet with them, and it's just networking opportunities. So I don't know where it's all going to go, but I like the direction it's going. Right. So it's kind of just a snowball effect, similar to with cold calling and following up with sellers. It takes a little bit of time to build that momentum, but once you do it, you can be unstoppable.
Yeah. I agree. I'm working on a deal right now. The sellers wanted a buy of me, and I just sent them my link. I'm like, look me up online. There's videos every day, and they're like, oh yeah, that's cool. And I'm sure they watch it. And so there's definitely a benefit to that. And especially what you said from the investor perspective, they sort of get on and know you before they actually know you, because you're posting and you're active and things. So I think there's benefits of it 100% for sure. So have you found all of your investors? Is it any friends and family, or did you put an ad on Facebook and that's how you found them?
Yeah. So I wish it was, most people say start with friends and family. My family is so conservative. My dad's still kind of just, hey, what are you doing? But he's just worked the same job 35 years as an engineer. He's trained to find anything that can go wrong. So this is not for him. But yeah, really, we had no friends and family. My fiance had one friend who was a large investor. So we've had basically some syndication, and then some just where one person puts in, for the full deal. And it's kind of, it's a partnership versus a syndication. So she's raised a couple $1 million from her side, but my side's kind of lacking. So I went to Facebook Marketplace, not Facebook Market, but Facebook ads. I saw other kind of apartment people doing that, posted some ads. I spent maybe 10 to 15 grand for, 3-4 months of ads, built up about 1,000 to 1,500 leads. And now I have a lead base, and, I blast them 10, 15 emails, and some don't ever reply, but then you put out a new deal and then you get a bite. So I found several larger investors like out of California that have, put in over $1 million each on deals. And it's been, I don't do the ads anymore, but I have that list built up. And then along with LinkedIn, even just like Yona Weiss posts a weekly thing, self promo Sunday, right? I posted one, we got a deal, and I found a decent sized investor off of that. So that was like one where it was, wow, this actually works. So to answer your question, yeah, it's not friends and family. I've built relationships by setting calls, talking with people over time, and it's not same thing with finding a seller that wants to sell. They're not going to invest with you right away, right? So if you have a deal you're trying to raise money for, you need to start well in advance, because it's sometimes 60 to 90 days is not even enough for them. You need to have prolonged contact to build that relationship and that trust. So yeah, so basically that's kind of the route we've gone now with LinkedIn, and now with a lot of repeat investors, just getting them their K1s on time, giving them their preferred returns, not pausing distributions like it seems like a lot of other, not people in our space, but in the apartment space, it feels like everyone's pausing distribution. So everyone's thankful that distributions are still going, and treat them right, and they'll come back around. And they haven't even given them full cycle, right? It's just by doing, the preferred returns, getting their tax returns, they've wanted to come into more deals. So half that I attribute to LinkedIn, and then half I would say was just doing Facebook ads, which I don't see really anyone else doing at this time in our space.
Yeah, for sure. I've seen some multifamily guys doing Facebook ads, but they're like, I don't know, there's like boring guys. I'm like, dude, I could better ad than that.
Oh, some of these guys do these videos, and they're so cheesy and stuff, but it works. And I noticed just by doing those, like they all put like the green check marks and the fire and the sirens and all. And once I started doing that, I was getting way more clicks. So you have to kind of just play that game. Just like it seems so cheesy, but that's what actually gets. And there's you can filter your ad. You want to target towards the maybe the bracket or the aged group that's going to invest with you, right? So my ads aren't going out to 20-year-olds that probably aren't accredited. So you got to set that criteria so that you get better success.
And you can set that criteria on there to do that?
Oh, you can. Facebook ads are crazy. Well, you can say, I want to find doctors in St. Louis that earn $100,000 to $200,000. You can drill it down very, very specific. Facebook, because Facebook's watching everything we do. They have all the data in the world on everyone. So once you get to the ads, you can filter. I mean, you could probably pick people that's name was Derek and their last name started with a V. You could do it that you could specify to that degree. It's just crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy, dude. So where do you so I guess I want to get into this. So I think all of us in this business, as we talked about in the beginning, we think it's going to be passive. We think it's going to be relatively easy when we get in. What has been your hardest lesson or two learned since you got into this business that maybe you didn't expect, or you were going in thinking it was going to be easier? I'd love to know, your hardest lesson learned.
Yeah, my hardest lesson learned is that, older tenant or older park-owned homes, parks with older infrastructure are just a huge turnaround. It takes much more time and effort than other parks where, say, they're all tenant-owned homes and newer homes. So a lot of people, when they're first looking at parks, they don't even look at the age of homes. I talk to new people and I say, hey, well, what age are the homes? And they don't even know, right? So at this point, I see metal on metal homes from the 60s or 70s. And also, if you don't have titles for the homes, right? So the seller, you get a bunch of abandoned homes. That's a nightmare process. You can't even demo them, get them out of your house or get them out of your park because you don't have titles. So a lot of people kind of rush and skip that step. And you learn that over time. And it's hard to know that on the front end. But I would just say my biggest challenge in the beginning, there was a park I was at every single day for months. And that was because it had older park-owned homes. We fixed the same furnace 4 times in a month. And it's just, you're just pouring money into it, time. The tenants, stuff's freezing in the winter because tenants aren't prepared. The seller never took care of the park. So you really have to, sometimes you just have to go through it, right? I try to tell people, and I don't want to, sometimes probably like yourself, when you're giving advice, it almost sounds like people feel like you're trying to talk them out of a deal and they're excited about buying it. But I try to tell them, hey, I went through this. I only try to buy tenant-owned home communities now with newer homes, good infrastructure. I like a good in-place manager already, because it's way more hands-on than you realize. And if you ever want to peel yourself out of the business and be able to let it run more smoothly and not get calls all the time, you have to build it the right way, or else you're just going to take on a way more than a full-time job.
Yeah, that's great advice. And when we first started buying these things, I'm like, shit, let's just buy everything, buy everything we can get, private utilities. We've got 4 wastewater treatment plants. And now when I look at a deal, it's like, I look at the age of the homes more. Really wasn't looking at that before because we found a little niche in the market where we could do really well, and we have done really well. But some of those same problems that you just talked about, titling is a pain in the ass. Yeah. Like, it's a headache. And not for the fact, yes, it costs money, but the time factor, because it takes some level of skill to handle that. Right. And these old park-owned homes, like, they can be converted. We've done some crazy stuff with old park-owned homes, but listen to what Andy is telling you. And I talk to people about this all the time. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not trying to talk you out of the deal. I want to give you the real that I didn't get in the beginning and the things I didn't expect. Because if you buy a wastewater treatment plant, the problem with that is that, yes, it works and it can be cheap. You're going to have something to do, like, there's going to be CapEx, but you have to deal with the agencies now, and it's a time suck if something happens. So, it's great advice, dude.
Yeah, I mean, so you have 4 on treatment plant. Treatment plant's the one thing I'm just scared of, just because of the sheer cost. And like you said, you got to report, and there's still. With treatment plants, they suck up a bunch of electricity. So they're still, like, it's not no utility cost, kind of like a septic. Septic, I'm a little more comfortable with, as far as a new septic system should run pretty lean, except for, your annual or whatever, whenever you pump it. But treatment plant certainly has a little more hair on it. So, and they haven't been able to pull the trigger on a treatment plant yet.
Yeah, it's when we purchased this park, last year, it was a 70 space park right up the road here, and they have a treatment plant. And a new health department inspector, like, everything was fine in due diligence, but new health department inspector comes in and says, oh, your spray field isn't percolating. So you got to redo your spray field. And here we are, $65,000, $70,000 later. And, 6 months of dealing with, the stupid health department back and forth. We're finally done with that.
Yeah.
And it's just something that you miss in due diligence, because these things were built probably not to code in the 60s or 70s whenever the park was built. So, like, they can come in whenever they want and find that a piece of equipment is not up to their current standards, and just make it tough for you. Like, we've got another plant that's probably, by the time we're done, it's probably another $75,000 of CapEx. We've done really well on these deals. So in the scheme of things, like, it doesn't matter, but they can still be a pain and just a time suck, because your property manager probably isn't skilled enough to, maybe they are, to deal with that on a daily basis. And so you got to deal with it.
Yeah, and exactly.
It can suck your time for sure. What would you, if you were, so with all the knowledge and stuff, that kind of piggybacks on the last question, with all the knowledge and things that you've gained now, Andy, in this business, if you could go back to yourself before starting, other than what you had just talked about, older park-owned homes and titles, what would you tell yourself that you didn't know at that time? Could be business in general too.
Yeah, I think I would, I tell myself, hey, these things aren't going to cash flow as much as you thought. Like, I had this whole plan mapped out. I was going to buy 1 park on my own. I was going to make $3,000 a month, but I've quickly realized the cash flow, even if it does cash flow, you're building in reserves, or it's not going to cash flow as much as you think out of the gate. So you have to have a plan for more down the road. These mobile home parks, at some point, will cash flow and you pay out your distributions, but for the most part, the value comes from your refinancing or selling. So it's again, you're not going to find it right away, and you're also not going to see money from it right away. So it's definitely not a get rich fast. It's a get rich faster than a lot of other forms of wealth creation, but it's not a get rich quick scheme or anything by any means. So I would just tell myself, be more patient. I would have probably gone the partner route even further, faster, found a deal, partnered with someone. And then, cause I mean, my second deal we bought was third deal was 2.7 million. And I never thought, I was already looking at that range. Right. But then once I had a partner, we were able to buy those and buy bigger. And people think a lot of times in the beginning, people don't want to partner because they feel like, I don't want to give up my profit. Right. But so you can buy 1 park on your own, let it consume you. And you maybe lose all your money because you didn't have the experience, or you go partner and buy 5 parks and get the same percentage of the pie or even more, and then learn a ton. So that's kind of what I would tell myself. Hey, don't be afraid to partner. Don't be afraid to, admit you don't know everything yet. Partner with someone more experienced. Seek out advice from, people like yourself that are doing it. And it's not, you're not admitting you don't know something. You're actually, it's leverage. You're leveraging someone else's that's already been doing it. You leverage their skills, their knowledge, and it helps you grow faster. So just not be afraid to kind of leverage other people's knowledge.
Yeah. And guys, that's great advice, because I did the exact same thing in the beginning. I was like, okay, I'm going to go buy one park on myself. And, maybe I, have a couple hundred lots right now. But then when I figured out, okay, partnering is the way to go, you get to scale a lot faster. And actually, when you scale faster, you can pull yourself out of the business relatively sooner than if you just own one park and you got to do most of the management and answer most of the calls and answer the call when, Susie's cat runs under Johnny's house or something. Like you got to do that. Right. So that's great advice, dude. And I think everybody that is listening to this should think about that. Right. So moving on, question here. Crazy. What's your 2 craziest mobile home park stories? I love the mobile home park stories. So give me your 1 or 2 craziest stories you've had when you're on property or whatever.
Well, one, I don't know if I should, well, I guess I don't know if I should say, I won't tell all the details, but basically it's one of the first parks that we bought. The guy with like face tattoos, head tattoos. When I first toured the park on my own, I was super scared. Once we purchased and I got to know him a little better, I thought he was just a good guy. He'd done time in jail. And then I had, basically he wanted to end up buying a house in the park. I vouched for him. Long story short, he did a very bad crime, not in the park, offsite. He's back in jail, and basically for a really, really, really bad crime. And it was something that like I had vouched for him, and I kind of quickly realized like history repeats itself. These tenants all have stories. They're all going to try to tell you something and make you believe something. I just, do your background checks. Don't vouch for anyone. And, luckily it wasn't in the park, but it was one of those things where if it had happened in the park, it'd kind of be all be on me. So that was, I don't know if that's a crazy story or a dumb story, but that's one of those things where you're going to encounter a lot of things that you wouldn't normally counter outside in your normal life. I've never dealt with attempted murderers and stuff, right? So you don't deal with that in your 9-to-5 job as an accountant, or not usually. So that's one crazy story. And then all the other stories are kind of similar to what everyone else goes through. Just homes, park greeters burning down their home and wanting the new, nicer home and stuff like that. It could go on for hours on this, but yeah, just like, oh, my house burnt down. Can I get the newer one that's available? And then they had an old 70s home and then they want the new one. So
they had this scheme in their head.
Yeah.
They were gonna. So you were an accountant. I went to school for accounting, but didn't graduate. And I did work in an accounting office for, I don't know, about 3 or 4 months during tax season. I learned really quickly that was not the route I wanted to go. Quickly.
Yeah, no, I did. I went to school for accounting. I did that for 10 years. I wasn't doing tax prep. I was doing AR for a healthcare company. I was working to get my CPA exam. And then once I really hunkered down to get that CPA license, like spending hours each day, I started questioning, is this really what I even want to do? So if I get my CPA license, do I really want to be a CPA? And that's kind of what I said no. And then that's kind of what led to the transition to go do something else.
Yeah.
I knew that wasn't the right path for me.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, I learned quickly. So where do you think, as we, in the crazy environment we're in, according to interest rates and things are going up, who knows where it's going to go. What do you think is sort of the future looks like for this business and operators like ourselves?
Yeah, I think there's still deals to be had. It's definitely not as many. I think those 4 and 5 cap stuff we're trading at, in 2021, 22 is it's not going to be the same. I think, the market's kind of corrected to probably where it should be. Sellers still want crazy high prices. There's going to be more, it's going to take a little bit longer, I think, for them to finally, because it's hard to grasp that your park was worth $1 million more or $2 million more, a couple years back. So I think it just takes time. I don't think there's going to be any drop off. I think it's with the asset class. it's still super stable. I think rents can still go up. So I think we can still drive the values that way, but I don't think there's going to be as many crazy transactions as there was. I think we just got to get used to maybe acquiring 2-3 parks a year and not, 10 parks a year. I mean, that's that kind of pace is just not normal. I think the market's actually still, to answer your question, I think the market's pretty good right now where it should be. I mean, you have to work hard to find a good deal. And when you do, you pounce on it, and then, you just keep looking, but it's not back before, a couple of years back, almost every deal could pencil out if you got a low enough interest rate and took rents up enough. So I think there's no cause for panic. I think it's maybe a little discouraging for some just getting into it, because it's changed a lot from the teachings and all the podcasts. I think like Ryan was kind of the first to kind of try to, hey, like this is not 10 cap world anymore. It's not even really maybe an 8 cap world. If you want a good asset in a good market, I mean, you might have to underwrite it a 4 or 5 cap and bake in some of the upside, which is hard for a newer person to do, because almost everything they listen to tells them 8 cap, 10 cap. And it's just kind of, so I think it's going to be a little bit harder for newer people to get into the space unless they're, really getting some good coaching from someone that can kind of convince them, hey, this is an alternate way to look at these deals.
Yeah, for sure. And it's really, just like it's about activity too. A new guy getting in the business, the guy making 200 calls a day is going to find a deal at some point versus the guy who's calling, 20 parks a day. And the interesting thing, Andy, is that, my acquisitions team that I have, and I've been, getting on the phone with sellers, and these are some people that, purchased, in the last year or two. Now they're ready to sell. And the numbers that they bought some of these parks for in Florida, I'm like, you're not getting out of that. You're stuck right now because you can't refi. That's not happening. And I'm not paying that. And it's just, more in the last 2 weeks, I've talked to people, and it's just has blown my mind what people have paid for some of these 20 and 30 space parks back within the last 2 years. It's crazy. And I don't know how they're going to get out of this.
What are they paying on it? Are they paying 4 caps, or what are they? Because Florida, I know
it's 100 a pad, 100 a pad, 90, 100.
It's extreme.
Yeah.
I mean, someone was saying on LinkedIn, I mean, basically at some point people are going to have to do cash in refis to get, I mean, they're going to have to bring cash to do a refi. I mean, instead of cash out, like we're all used to when we underwrite, I mean, to go to refi or to extend your loan, you have to bring cash to the deal if you overpaid.
Yeah. Yeah. That's crazy to think about. And look, we paid that park that I was just telling you about with the treatment plant. We paid 90 a pad for that, and a park down the street, we paid just about 100 a pad for that. But so let me tell you a little bit about this. There's a Ruth Chris, let's see, 3/4 of a mile down the road. There's a Whole Foods 3/4 of a mile down the road, and the lot rent is very high. So that's my justification for paying that. But yeah, I don't know what some people are going to do. I mean, I hear, people in the multifamily space that, went in and bought these things at 3 caps and were, underwriting interest rates staying low. And now they're just, they're toast. And, I don't see that happening in our industry. Maybe a little bit with some people that did pay these, egregious prices and then got into it and figured out, hey, it's a little bit harder to collect the rent than I thought. And, there may be some trouble there here within the next, 6 to 12 months, and maybe there'll be some opportunities. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't think there's so many people waiting to buy, right? So even if there are opportunities, someone in distress, it's going to get scooped up quick. There's going to be so many people are on the sidelines saying this is what they're waiting for. So it's going to just drive the price of that asset right back up. So someone fumbles a deal in Tampa, I mean, there's already a feeding frenzy on the sidelines to buy it up, and that's going to get bid up, right? So I think there's going to be some distress, but I don't think it's still not going to just land in your lap for a cheap price.
No,
is kind of my feel.
Yeah, no, I agree, but I think it's important now for people, if you're getting into the market, whether you're new or you're in the market, you got to stay in the market, dude. Like you have to keep calling. You got to keep networking. You got to keep doing all those things, because if you just throw your hands up and you're like, shit, I'm done, you're not going to find anything. Like when the deals come around, like you're not You're not going to be the first in line for, a deal that comes back to the bank and they call, so-and-so that's still in the market. So super, super important to just stay in the market. And for an entrepreneur like me, wants to go do crazy things like me, like it's hard to stay patient.
Yeah. It's hard to stay patient. That's one of the things is stay patient. It's everyone wants to buy the deal. And I mean, that's the fun part, right? Everyone likes to show off the purchase. And I post just because it's good to let people see your closing deal. It helps bring more deals your way, but purchasing is honestly probably the easy part of it. Operating and running the park and managing it long-term, 5-10 years. That's the hard part. So that's the part that no one ever talks about after they show that, we closed on this deal, and they don't, there's no follow-up on how operations are going necessarily. And that's so I warn people, yeah, you close, but are you really gonna be able to operate that for 5 to 10 years? It's just, you look at that park and think that when you're buying it, like, am I committed to this for say 10 years?
Yeah. And that's a good point, because these parks, like, in the beginning, I thought, okay, we could turn these around in a year, but no, they get more and more stable as the years go on. So the very first park that we bought is probably one of our most stabilized parks right now, because we were buying, heavy value add, all park-owned homes, junk. And so the turnaround, it's taken a lot longer than I had thought. But that first park, we've had that for, I guess, almost 3 years now. And that's definitely our most stable park. And so over time, they do get a little bit easier. Like, there's still problems, don't get me wrong, but it's definitely easier than it was when we first purchased that, for sure. Well, cool, Andy. I appreciate you coming on, man. It's been a pleasure. Is there anything you want to say before we close out here? Any golden nuggets or words of wisdom?
No, I think I hammered it home. Just really be patient. I was the same way. I wanted to buy my first park. I wanted to get my first park. Just don't rush into it. The first park, and you don't necessarily have to even do perfect on your first park. Just don't buy something bad that's going to, sink you before you even get started. Don't look long-term, get the first deal done, but just set yourself up for success, and listen to what other people tell you, and ask as many people as you want advice on, do you see anything wrong with this deal? Just don't try to do it all on your own. Buy something smart and use that as a stepping stone to go on to bigger and better deals. Because your first deal, you can't go buy a 200 unit park in your first deal, and the first deal that you buy is not going to necessarily change your life. So you want to get something, you're going to get that experience, use that as a stepping stone, move on to the next ones, which can change your life.
Well, that's awesome, man. I love that. Well, thanks for coming on, Andy. And thank you, everybody, for listening to the MHP Show. We will be on every week. I'm trying to keep up with it every week now. So maybe, who knows where we'll go from here. But thank you guys for watching. Leave a comment, and we will see you next week.